Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Seidenberg School of Computer Science and Information Systems Tech Lecture Series. And we are always interested in featuring emerging areas of technology. And I think a lot of people have had the advent of legal tech kind of sneak up on them. Um, all of a sudden, our lives are run by the law and by attorneys, and all of a sudden, I think we are understanding just how specialized technology is in the law field, and that's recognizing that some of the very best people in driving change in the legal field have a technology background. And we're going to focus on some of those folks today from very prestigious white shoe law firm, Wilkie Farr. And again, I'm Jonathan Hill. I have the honor and privilege of serving as Dean of the Seidenberg School of Computer Science and Information Systems. And today's conversation is going to focus on the tools and the intersection of the law and business practice and technology in the legal field. And we have three real leaders with us today from Wilkie Farr and Gallagher, which is one of the top international firms in the country with over 700 attorneys and offices in 6 countries. And today they're going to share their expertise and insights on the ways technology is disrupting and transforming the workforce and the whole process of practicing law. And to lead us in our discussion, I am delighted to introduce this truly stellar panel. To begin with, Heather Schneider is a familiar face and friend of ours. Heather holds a special place in our hearts here at PACE because she is an alumna and also serves on the Seidenberg School's advisory board. Heather graduated from the Seidenberg School with a master's in computer science and holds a Juris Doctor from Columbia Law School. Heather is a partner in the intellectual property department at Wilkie Farr and Gallagher, and her practice focuses on patent litigation, antitrust issues involving intellectual property, and client counseling on patent and IP issues associated with licensing, mergers, and bankruptcy. Heather is second vice president on the board of the New York Intellectual Property Law Association. Prior to law school, Heather worked as a senior technical consultant for Hewlett-Packard, and she is co-author of the book Mobile Applications, Architecture, Design, and Development. So welcome home, Heather, as always.
Thank you, Jonathan.
And would like to next welcome John Elbason. John holds a bachelor's degree from New York University and an MBA from Columbia Business School. John is the Chief Information Officer at Wilkie Farr and Gallagher. And for more than 20 years, John has been a champion of digital transformation and the intersection of law and technology. John serves on ILTA's G100 CIO Advisory Group and previously served on ALM's Legal CIO Advisory Board. John has regular speaking engagements with the New York State Bar Association and other industry-focused forums. He's also served as a recognized adjunct professor on the faculty of Bryan University with subject matter concentration on e-discovery. As a certified information security professional, John provides advisory services to clients on their overall information security and governance initiatives, and sits on client steering committees focused on technology strategy as well as technology governance. And finally and wonderfully, we are joined by Michelle Del Valle. Michelle is a graduate of Fordham University with a degree in organizational development. Michelle is the Human Resources Manager for Wilkie Farr and Gallagher. She serves as an internal business partner to the firm, working with the Information Technology Department. In this capacity, she applies her expertise in organizational development and recruiting to the full recruiting cycle for technology hires. Prior to Wilkie, Michelle worked for the U.S. commodity trading arm of Mitsubishi International Corporation, where she played a key role in developing Mitsubishi's management development training program, which was created to bring business school level expertise to global and U.S. staff to facilitate the expansion and spin-off of Mitsubishi companies into U.S. tech markets through the acquisition and development of intellectual property. Panelists, thank you so much for being here today. And let's get started. I want to thank everyone from our Seidenberg and Pace community for coming out today, and I trust this is going to be a very enlightening conversation. So to begin, I'd like to ask each of you, how you got to be here today. You've got this real interest in people to start with, and you've pursued a specialization in the technology area, and you followed that into law. Heather, maybe we could start with you. You've got this master's degree in computer science and a law degree from Columbia. Obviously, you're an ambitious and driven person, and a very nice person as well. But how did you get here?
Thanks, Jonathan. Jonathan, for introductions of anyone. So yeah, no, I had moved to New York from Ohio, which is where I grew up, and went to undergraduate school in Ohio and was working in New York, and decided I wanted to go back and study computers, and went to Pace, which was great. I was attending part-time at the New York City campus while I was just working at internships and other things during the day. And loved my Pace education, went straight into working for a computer company. At the time, it was Digital Equipment Corporation, which got bought by Compaq, which got bought by Hewlett Packard. So in the course of 5 years, I worked for all three of those companies. And I loved it. I was a programmer. I was doing a lot of development for websites in Java and Microsoft.NET technologies for a lot of banks. And but I started learning a little bit about IP and also antitrust, being in the computer space. And I had always been sort of interested in law school, but I had always thought when I was younger, I would do, I don't know, employment law or criminal law or something. And when I learned about IP law, intellectual property law, and antitrust issues involving, computer software and other things when I was at HP, I decided to go back to law school, specifically using my tech background to become an IP lawyer. And I got to tell you, for those of you who are either in the computer science degree now or law school or whatever, law firms are hungry for lawyers with technical degrees. IP is a growing field, whether you're doing litigation or transactional, whether your background is in computers or pharma or biotech. The market was hot when I was interviewing, back 15 years ago now, and it's still hot today. So I used my technical degree at work, and then got to know people like John and Michelle and our whole technical staff at the firm, and realized how much is beyond just the actual IP law I practice. So that's how I got here today.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Heather. And John, obviously you like pressure. You're Chief Information Officer, but I can just imagine, I think the audience can just imagine that the information you're protecting for a major law firm is pretty juicy stuff in the eyes of the bad actors out there. So with someone with a cybersecurity background, with an MBA, interested in the whole business process, what brought you to this very hot seat as CIO of Willkie Farr?
That's a great question. I think for me, law firms and quite a bit of the privately held businesses, like we're all accustomed to name brand, publicly traded businesses. We want to work at such and such bank or such and such industry or such and such tech company. But there's a vast section of the economy that sometimes we overlook, and it's sometimes the most rewarding. And I like to think law firms have a very nice coveted seat at the table that some people often don't quite know at first glance. Lawyers by their nature are problem solvers. They're some of the best problem solvers in the world. Many of them very quite analytical, engineering minded. Heather, epitomizes that. It's wonderful being able to work with quite intelligent, interesting, and engaging people. We could have a conversation on IP law, but then shift to cryptography and encryption technologies and other things because they're pertinent to our clients' needs. So I guess it was an amalgam. I always enjoyed the boundaries of law and how precedent and how really well-meaning lawyers were able to push law to where it needs to be for society. And we do it in many different facets at our firm. Both from a pro bono perspective to corporate transactional to intellectual property. And as a technologist, I always wanted to anchor to that. Privately held businesses are quite flat organizationally most of the time, so you could make an impact and a difference. You're not layered with 10 of you to do something. So you could break out and make a name for yourself and be known. So for me, those two combinations were very powerful, and it kept me in the industry. Even though I had started much earlier in a consultancy background where I had a variety of mixes, I found something about the cadence of law firms much different for the better, and I stuck with it, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah, really interesting stuff. And Michelle, you've come to this from, the human resources perspective, from the people development side of it. Um, what does it take to be good at legal tech?
I think to be good at legal tech, you really need to be comfortable with technology, but really have curiosity, to really be a lifelong learner, because technology changes so quickly that you can come into a firm with a particular skill set, and within a very short period of time, the technology has changed. um, we need people who are chasing the technology. We need people who are hungry to learn about emerging technologies and have interest in business and how those technologies can drive business or product to make businesses better and more productive. So when I look for someone to work at the firm, I not only look at their current skill set, but I really look at, is this person someone who is really, turned on by learning? Is this person someone who is interested in what we do as a business and interested in continuing to enhance their skill set to make the business productive? That sort of convergence between being interested in the law and then how can technology can be applied to that in many different types of jobs that we have is what I really look for.
Yeah. And if I could ask just a follow-up, Michelle, what works in developing those people? If you are able to identify candidates who can meet the business needs of the firm and have the tech skills to help John, what works in terms of developing those folks professionally?
Well, we have jobs in a lot of different areas, but if I'm placing someone in the IT space, and I've worked very closely with John in the last several years in terms of helping him staff sort of a state of the art IT department. I am a very big person on apprenticeships and a very big person on learning on the job, because not every there are many fine universities that provide wonderful tech degrees, but the way universities are set up, not every university has, and even the most prestigious universities in the country don't always have the financial backing to have labs present with the state of the art equipment that people really need to be given a chance to work on. So what we do at Wilkie is we often will hire people with experience, but we often hire people who are just straight out of school and have them intern with the firm. I usually have them work with any number of different staff in my IT department, either engineers, applications developers, cybersecurity experts, where they get a chance to develop relationships, but also work with really cutting edge technology in terms of the discipline that they're placed in. And that allows us to continue their education. Wilkie also bills dollars into our budget for continuing education for our staff that have experience already, because once again, everyone has to continue to keep to keep sharp. And that often means in the technology space, certifications and continuing education.
I'd like to piggyback on that a bit,
Yeah.
if I may. I think it's important to note that across our gamut, from lawyers to technologists, there's this mentoring that Michelle talked about resonated with me just now. And part of it is the application of skills. You all are amassing phenomenal theoretical skills in the classroom. And from what we've gathered, you're also applying those in virtual labs. But there's something tangible about doing it in the moment, in the live setting. And so our interns, both on the attorney side, our summer program is one of the highest ranked in the country, and it's because of and Heather will probably touch on this and how much mentoring they do there. But on the internship side that we started for the technologist, it's kind of the same ethos. When we bring on a security intern, they are treated no differently as a junior analyst. They're in the dashboards, they're in the systems. We may open up access to them once there's a trust built there, and all of a sudden they're driving the machinery, and that for a lot of learners clicks. So if you're a development intern, a security intern, or whatnot, it immediately makes you realize what all that preparation was for. And I think that's what I view this program that you all have. It's a preparation. So Heather, I'm sure you have some thoughts on it from a legal perspective.
Yes, I mean, one of the things we always do, like John said, with our summer interns and everybody, is, like you said, treat them like real employees. I mean, yeah, we do some whining and dining and take them to Broadway shows when they're open. But for the lawyers, we're giving them real research assignments. We're inviting them to real client calls for the IT staff and the security staff. Because that's how people can really get out of the classroom. So the more you can do those kind of internships and labs while you're in school, the better that you can get that real world experience.
Yeah, and that's always been a focus for us here at the Seidenberg School at Pace University is you get your theory in the classroom, and then you come out into the lab setting and you apply that theory, and then you're prepared, we like to think, when you walk in the door at Wilkie Farr and you're able to sit down and at your stand-up desk if you prefer, but you're able to execute quickly because you've got experience with the hands-on part of it, and you're also open to learning quickly the protocols of the individual business. I want to take just a quick moment to give a shout out to some of our celebrity faculty participants, Dr. Dan Farkas and Dr. Richard Klein. No stranger to intellectual property lawsuits is he. And our Seidenberg Advisory Board member, Howard Meadow. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad that you're here. Talking to some of your colleagues, right? There is this perception that the legal industry is very conservative, is averse to technology, in part because as problem solvers, there's this perception that any business that's done over the internet is not safe, and that it's the private documents and private information are out there. And so there's this perception that the legal industry is not interested at being on the cutting edge of technology. Is that I meet you and talk with you, and it seems to me that's not the case. But if you look across your industry, and you're all involved in industry-wide organizations, what's the real status of the legal industry and technology today? Heather, I'd start with you.
Yeah, I'll start and say, so our firm has a technology committee, and I was on that when I was an associate, and it really helped. Sometimes I think that we are interested in more cutting edge technology, but I think what happens is sometimes we have to be cautious because of the importance of the information we have. So we have to make sure that the software we're using hooks up with our record management system, that you can control versions and access. And so sometimes we can't immediately use the newest version of Windows or Microsoft Office because of that. But other than that, I think we've got a very cutting edge software. The fact that I've been working from home for the last 7 or 8 months now, while completely in a virtual environment every day, is a testament to John and Michelle and our whole staff, because I have clients who don't even know where I am, and they just know they can call me and my work phone rings and they can Zoom me, and it's all completely seamless.
Yeah, what are your thoughts, John?
So I'd like to think that I'm going to call it a myth. I'm going to try to debunk it here, and I'll let you all be the jury to decide if I can debunk it effectively. So I'm going to take a bit of a macro stance on this. The top 100 global law firms, which really are still a fraction of the total amount of legal professionals globally, but it makes about $100 billion in revenue annually. The top 50, if you rank them individually, they would be ranked in the Fortune 100 if they were a publicly held business as it relates to net earnings. So this is a very healthy part of the economy. And proportionally, anywhere from 5+% per annum is spent on technology. So the dry powder of billions of dollars at the disposal of technology is there every single year. I think where the bad rap comes in normally is that we question change. We want to know, why are we changing business process? Is it for the better, or is it really just some additional layer of, back to my point of lean, mean, running to the point organizations? Is it additional overhead? And if it's transformative, then there's a lot of work that a lot of people have to do to galvanize thousands of employees across varied geographies to mobilize that change. And I'm sure that's no different in academia, law, fintech, anywhere. And I have colleagues throughout fintech, and it's really no different. I think the catch with law firms historically has been, well, do you create your own technology? Because that's a bellwether for, are you really supporting this movement of technology? Well, the fact is, and there's a couple of universities tracking this. There's an innovation index being done, and I strongly recommend you guys look into it. I can send the links. But these innovation indexes have been benchmarking firms like Wilkie and others and finding we are creating custom software. We have a full software development team at Wilkie that builds full stack code to get our clients connected into sophisticated portals and knowledge management systems outside the business so that they could transact their work more efficiently. And in addition to that, some have become so successful that they've become offshoots of law firms altogether. So there's a whole new industry developing where law firms such as ours are building another service standalone advisory business just to handle technology business process improvement, e-discovery efforts. And they're then incubating startups. And one that comes to mind is Denton's with NextLab. They're doing a phenomenal job incubating those startups and actually pouring capital into them so that they can be wildly successful. And the areas that we're focused on as an industry are artificial intelligence, mining complex legal data sets. In addition to that, as we touched on, security, data privacy, how do we create better privacy in the cloud? So again, I'm really trying my best here to debunk this myth, and I hope I'm succeeding. And I could go on and on about this, but that's a little taste of everything going on. And then lastly, I'll leave you with this. I think it was Heather, Arizona, that just completely changed the ABA requirements for ownership of law firms, where historically, law firms in the United States are owned by equity law licensed professionals. I suspect over the next, and this is my future hat on, I suspect over the next 10 to 20 years, you will see a much different complexion of ownership structures of law firms. And it may not be all law firms, mind you, but there'll be alternative vehicles and they'll be very tech minded. One that comes to mind is a startup in Silicon Valley called InCloud Counsel. And what InCloud Counsel has done is they've essentially taken lawyers that are very good at what they do, but maybe don't want to do it for 40+ hours a week and want to do it more of an Uber gig economy. And they've connected them with hedge funds and alternative asset management firms to work on more of their mid-tier document reviews and whatnot, and they become wildly successful. So I think everything is possible in this industry, and I think the overtures in the media are a bit harsh on this topic, but this is one we could talk about for hours, so I'll pause on that point.
Yeah, and I kind of, your wonderful statement begs the follow-up question, John. We've all seen articles about how AI is replacing, entry-level attorneys, and AI is faster and more accurate at reviewing contract language, and it doesn't take lunch breaks and go to Aruba for a week in the winter. So there's been some backlash, I think, right? And those of us in tech hear this all the time. You're killing jobs. AI is going to kill jobs. But from what you're saying, it sounds like technology is going to change the work of lawyers, but that work may, in fact, create the need for more attorneys.
That's right.
No?
I mean, Heather can speak to this in more detail, but in the litigation space, for example, there's a lot of underserved companies that would like to take a case to litigation, but the cost of taking a case to litigation can be exorbitant. And maybe Heather, you could speak to how some of the evolution of technology is helping more cases go there.
Yes, I mean, as everything has become digitized, the cost of litigating has just increased so much. You know, it used to be the partners I work for, you know, are not much older than me, used to work where they just reviewed all the documents in a case by hand in a room, right? You print them out and go through, you know, maybe 50 boxes. Now we just have millions of pages of documents that are produced in litigations. And so one whole big chunk of the legal tech industry are what they call the e-discovery vendors, the electronic discovery vendors, that make it so that you don't have to hire, you know, you can do some combination of document review with AI, some combination of attorneys who work at our firm, some that we hire as contract attorneys. You know, because you just can't physically, you know, spend the money to go through all these documents by hand. And the same is happening now with corporate. You know, we'll have a transaction and there's hundreds of license agreements in the data room. We actually just are trying out some AI technology at Wilkie, and we had a training last week. And at first I thought, oh, maybe we could replace all the associates, but I love our associates. So, and it's not the case at all, but we can offload some of the, frankly, pretty crappy work of just opening document after document of hundreds of PDFs to look for a clause, you know, to see if it's there, and use this AI software to help say, all right, you've got 300 agreements, 5 of them are different than the other. We think they say this. You still need an attorney to review that, but it's actually much better work for the attorney and than just, you know, rote, you know, looking at documents.
Yeah, agreed. And you all will have the benefit of never having to live through it again. But those that were in the legal industry during the 90s, especially in the 90s, was kind of the height of it. If you worked on a major matter, and this was kind of the trade secret, basements of buildings were turned in overnight to war rooms, right? The
Yes.
worst possible spaces. And people would be going through what we call banker boxes, these corrugated boxes that became dusty and moldy. And people would have to sift through that and key that in. We have come far from that, and partly because everything's gone digital. So because everything's gone digital, the way we work and where we work has vastly changed. And so I think that will continue with some of the AI tools Heather touched on. So it's exciting times because people creating those tools, supporting those tools, analyzing what comes out of those tools, those are all new jobs, a whole new economy. And to me, that's what kind of motivates me to keep going on this stuff.
Yeah, it's so exciting, and I want to come back and spend a little more time on these technologies. But you know, Michelle, Bill Gates said some years ago that Microsoft doesn't compete for talent with Google; they're competing for talent with Goldman Sachs. Who are you competing for technology talent to help Wilkie run?
It's an interesting question because I think that to find what we've had to do at Wilkie is to be really creative in terms of sourcing talent, because they're jobs that, you know, we have many firms that are many fine firms, are peer firms of ours who, and we're all looking for the same talent. Wilkie is really interesting in that it really does approach finding talent in very creative types of ways. And once again, I'll go back to that whole concept of mentorship. I hire a lot of IT staff who are very experienced. Some are from law firms, some are from financial organizations, some are from insurance companies. We don't necessarily look for people who have experience in that closed legal pool. We try to expand and be creative in terms of where we source our talent to be able to find the best talent that we can find out there. We also try to grow our talent as well. When I hire a network engineer or cybersecurity person, I hire someone who's not only a technologist, but someone who also is a teacher. I like to hire people who could potentially mentor others. And so a lot of what we look for as well is people that are less experienced, who we can potentially grow into jobs. And that gives us an opportunity to grow our talent in the specific Wilkie way, the way we approach business and the way we approach technology, to our advantage. So we're looking at creating streams of people who are either, coming out of school, streams of people who are earlier in their careers, and also people obviously who have very strong technical chops, who then can come in and potentially grow others as well. So we're looking at different areas. We're not just pulling, our competition is not just from law firms. We've hired people from hedge funds. We've hired people from financial services. We've hired people from Apple. We look at all different, we are open to who we hire. Used to be firms only wanted people who had legal experience. And if you do that, we're all competing for the same talent. And if somebody has someone who's really good, our engineers are fabulous. We want to keep them. And they stay with us because we have a great culture, and we build an education for them. We have a CIO who is a technologist, not just an excellent business person, but also a technologist who challenges them, gives them opportunities to grow. And if you're doing all of that, your staff, you can really bring in some fabulous, fabulous talent. So we're drawing from a lot of different areas, not only competing with law firms. Our competition is really businesses all across the spectrum.
Very interesting. And
And
I've
when
heard that CIO guy's pretty good. So
Yeah, yeah, not bad. One thing I wanted to add to Michelle's point, it was when she talks about hiring people that are good teachers, the staff we have is so good at teaching, not just other technologists, but the associates, right? Every year, right, I get a crop of new first-year lawyers in who know nothing about the firm or how to save their emails or anything. And they get staffed on a big litigation where they have to learn all these tools and review millions of documents or do whatever. And it's those people, the senior technology people, who I'm always like, okay, go ask this person, go ask Mike, go ask Ona. We have a whole group of people that basically have to explain to the whole new crop of lawyers how to use all these tools, how to get things done. And so the advice I give to any of you who happen to be law students is when you get to your firms, those are the people you're going to be relying on a lot. I mean, especially when I was a junior associate, I would spend, you're trying to get documents out the door to the other side at 2 a.m. It's not your partner who's your boss that you're hanging out with. It's the people from IT and the tech support department trying to get that stuff done. So those are people who end up helping you a lot.
wow, really, really interesting stuff. Now, Heather, I think you may have the coolest job in America, if not in the whole world. And your clients are coming to you with these proprietary technologies. I gather quite a few of them are startups. You've got this kind of ringside seat for where business is going and manufacturing and the heart of technology. So two-part question, and the first part is, what are you seeing that you're excited about?
I definitely think the increase in AI is interesting, not just as tools for lawyers, but there's debates right now about the patentability of AI software, about can inventions made by AI be patentable? So if I program an AI and the AI comes up with something, either write something or invent something, can I get a copyright or a patent on that? That's a really interesting issue that the patent office is struggling with. And it's only going to get more complicated as the AI gets more and more advanced. And then the pharmaceutical biotech space, the kind of stuff that can happen now with personalized medicine and genetic testing. And to me, I'm very interested in the crossover between pharma and computer science and big data. It's really interesting to me that some of the companies that have the most genetic data now are companies like Google and stuff like that. A lot of what we help our clients do is make sure they have the right property rights in the data that they own. So it's not just patents, but making sure that if you have databases of genetic information, for example, that you have the right ownership in that, as well as the right protections from hacking and cybersecurity interests, as well as the right privacy protection. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we've got a number of our young entrepreneurs here, not so young entrepreneurs, in the presentation this afternoon. And what advice can you give them about when it's time to call you up and make an appointment to see you with their concepts and their potential business.
I think it's always important to be looking at IP from the beginning. And we have some small clients. We do a lot for private equity companies. So we do a lot of work for portfolio companies of private equity companies. So we're helping them manage their IP from the beginning. We also do some pro bono. There's a group called NYPACE. It's not affiliated with you, but every time I see it, I'll have to send you a link. It's NYPACE. That helps small businesses. And so sometimes I do pro bono work with companies like that. It's basically never too early to be thinking about IP. Not all the work I do is handling a $10 million patent litigation. Some of it is just helping somebody like trademark their logo, or come out with a new brand campaign. So it's never too early to be thinking about IP at some stage, because whether it's just the name of your company, to the software you're developing, to your giant database, there's something you should be thinking about at each step of the way.
Really interesting. So, dear audience, community members, in just a couple of minutes, I'm going to be turning the questions over to you. And I know we've got some good ones coming up in the chat. We like to make this as much of a community experience and as much of a conversation as we can. So if you're willing to turn your camera on, we appreciate that, because it enriches the experience, but no pressure. So let's look at this, if we can, for a moment from a career perspective. For those who are in school right now, and for our faculty, John, what would you like our faculty to be working with our students on today, so that would get them really ready to come and work with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first and foremost, as early as you can, and sometimes it sounds counterintuitive, but you should start thinking about specialization. A lot of times I hear many people come out from their undergrad program or master's program still undecided about focus. Your years in undergrad and your master's program are about tooling where your focus will be. Not that your first career or second job out of that is going to be at that place that you ultimately want to be, but you really start needing to craft that. The technology space is just too specialized now. You would do yourself a disservice to say you're kind of a generalist. In many regards, you'd ultimately get pigeonholed as such, and that may not be good for you long-term career prospect-wise. Find a place you're interested in, that you love about the technology, and really go full throttle into that area, and don't reset or recalibrate unless you've completely convince yourself out of that space. So I think that's my first advice, which is it's never too early to start to think about where that specialization is going to be.
Yeah, and Michelle, what do they need to do to get your team to pick their resume out of the batch and call them for an interview?
I think they need to have, again, I think to sort of echo John's point, they really need to have focus, and they need to have experiences in school that can show us that they are intellectually curious, that they've taken on projects that were challenging, that they have the ability to work in teams, that they have good communication skills. All of these are important, besides the technology background, because they will be in positions, when I look at someone to bring them into my IT department, I really look at somebody who is going to go the extra mile, someone who is going to say, okay, maybe I don't understand this technology, or I have not had exposure to something like Palo Alto, but I am going to go on the internet and look at this and see what this is about, to see how this is being used, how this software is being used by firms, who so that they can speak at least intelligently about research that they've done in their discrete areas. That's important to me. I would, I don't have a lot of the people that I hire with not a huge amount of experience. And I also hire people with experience, but maybe not experience in a specific area that they may need to have ultimately to be able to grow in that job. But the person that distinguishes themselves is the person that says, goes into an interview and says, okay, I don't have this experience, but I know what this is used for. I understand what this particular program, why this particular program is used as a firewall. I understand how the cloud works and what concerns a firm may have relative to a cloud. I understand how these things work. You don't have to be an expert or have to have touched everything. We don't expect that every single person, including our engineers, will have touched every single technology that we are using. Quite frankly, John has built a state-of-the-art department. We have some of the best technology out there in the law firm space. And so people are not going to have all of that experience. But the person that comes to me and says, I understand why this is used, and gives me a fulsome answer in terms of that. Again, back to intellectual curiosity, back to a lifelong learner, back to somebody who really has a passion for technology. Because ultimately, they're going to be interviewed by John. John handpicks every single person that is hired in that department. He meets with every single person, from the most junior intern right up the ladder to the most senior engineer. John does not hire anyone unless he can actually have a conversation with them, because he's a technologist. He's interested in technology. He's fascinated. He has a passion for technology, but also he understands what each individual person in his department does. And that allows him to be able to be creative and to grow people. So that person that comes to the conversation with the same level of passion and intellectual curiosity is what I'm really looking for, regardless of where they rank in terms of their level of experience.
And I think I just want to bookend that, because I don't want you to leave here going, that's unique to Wilkie or unique to my management style. You're going to, as professionals, you're going to be put through a gauntlet when you're hired. That's just the nature of the beast. More than ever before, every position matters, the most junior to the most senior at the firm. And it goes across all of our functional areas, attorneys to our administrative personnel. We go through a gauntlet. But when I compare that to the tech industry executives and managers, while you may not speak to the CTO or CIO of Google, you will speak to a very senior manager of the business function you're interviewing for. So you must be able to impress upon your skills and your ability to grow across a cross-disciplinary group of people. So you should always be prepared for that. And the one thing that Michelle said that reminded me of something that I want to impart today is, we expect in 2020 for any CS major to have some scripting and software development skills. I cannot press upon that enough. If you are in technology, you must be able to script. And if it's Python, JSON, whatever your scripting language is, PowerShell, you must adapt one and learn it, because you could be in security, you could be an application architect, you could be in support. Frankly, you could be a lawyer in a few years' time, and you're working on a blockchain document, and you need to understand syntax. And Heather can share with you all the emerging space on that front, but you need to know what line code looks like, bottom line. And if you don't, then that's a deficiency.
Time to study up, folks. And this is,
I agree.
and that's a really wonderful point to make, John. I appreciate it. And it's a time for our wonderful students to have a chance to ask the questions. Demina Towns, are you ready and available?
Hi, yes, I am.
Hi.
My question was kind of answered already with some of the previous questions and testimonies, but my question was, what experience do you believe best prepares a developer to work in the legal tech field? And my experience, I've worked in application support, a little bit in management, and mostly development over the last 6 years, but I have no legal experience. I've taken no courses within types of security or or criminal justice. So what kind of experience would I need to succeed or do well and get into the legal tech field?
Sure. I mean, I'll take a stab at it. And I want to qualify something. So with developers, we look for both full stack developers, and we also sometimes look for front end developers, people that are building the UX. If we focus on UX, it's really about design principles, accessibility. You have to understand that there's probably, for the very first time in our economy, multi-generational users. We cut across, what is it now, 4 generations, Michelle, that are in the workforce? And I think we may get to 5 somehow. I don't know how that works, but we're getting close. And so you have a lot of different learning modalities, people's take on using a computer, resolutions, how buttons are laid out on phones, tablets. So from a development perspective, if you're front end, it really is being considerate of who's connecting to those systems and how they're using it day in and day out. So that we look for on that front. Full stack, we need you to know trust principles. Data's moving between different tiers. You need to code securely. There's a lot of great boot camps, a lot of great knowledge articles on that stuff that you could do and polish up on now. So it's great to know, again, the development code, and we expect you to know that if you're applying for that job. But now the level has gone up where it's, well, do you know how to do it securely? Can you do a stored procedure with proper security protocols under it? And then a security analyst is going to try to poke holes at that and come back to you and say, well, you missed this cipher strength, or you're not allowing it to create the necessary entropy, and therefore it's failing my vulnerability test. So I think it's understanding cross-discipline is what I'm getting at. So I think those are 2 driving factors. Of course, it goes without saying, be up to speed on latest development toolkits that align with the company. For us, it could be Bootstrap, as I said, a lot of JSON. So that's a little bit more dependent on the company. But most of the time we're mainstream on that kind of stuff. But it's all these other things that we're really trying to find in the resume.
Yeah, so I'm going to chime in just quickly. My answer to that is you don't need legal experience if you're developing. What you do need to do is to understand that what we have is our data, and our data, we are only as good as our ability to secure our data for our clients. And so if you are a developer, security, to be able to develop and to be able to protect what you develop, and to develop really with a total mindset toward how your work can be just really locked down and tight is super, super important. Law firm experience is not necessarily, we have desktop delivery people that need to have some law firm experience because they're working with maybe integration of legacy programs that we have, or specific programs, but most of our IT people do not necessarily have to have law firm experience.
And I would just add, in terms of the secure, development life cycle, I think that's changed even since the time I got my master's degree from Pace in '99. I mean, yeah, you always were concerned about security, and you would always, when I left and worked for HP after I graduated from Pace, of course, if you were working on an application, people, there'd be a group that would test it. But I don't think the security was in the DNA of the developers the way it has to be now. It was more like, we programmed the way we wanted to program. Somebody would test it and say, oh, we hacked into your system. All right, we make some changes. And I think that just has to be so integral to everything now. You just have to assume that from the second any program goes live, so many people are trying to attack it, including well-funded nation states and political campaigns, and law firms are a big target, So.
Oh, huge.
Yeah, massive, really interesting. And I see that my old friend Carl Ishwer has a question. Hi, Carl.
Thank you, Dino. So my question really picks up from John's analogy from earlier on the war room and how it's shifted to become this huge data center, and also how Heather mentioned this paradigm shift and how far technology has come, especially in intellectual property, and how far it's come away from the legal system. And from my experiences, in competing on Pace's mock trial team, I've seen how archaic the legal system is as of right now, in the inevitable case that a case goes to trial and is litigated in trial. Now, how does Wilkie Farr foresee using technology to offset this archaic legal system that we're still developing off of to match the current technology needs and technology litigation as it happens today?
I'll address that, and then I'm sure John and Michelle will add. The court system, it varies in terms of the archaicness, if that's the word. I do immigration court pro bono for people where I'm in family court in Brooklyn, and that's like, very low tech. But then I do patent litigation in Delaware, where we have graphic artists and people who do all of our graphics for us at every desktop, including the judge and the jury. You have panel screens to show animations and slides and stuff. We did a case at Wilkie. It was a big bankruptcy of the Canadian company Nortel, the telecommunications company. And they were filing for bankruptcy in the US and Canada. And so we actually did a joint trial that was being done in the same time in Toronto and Delaware. Both judges were sitting in their place. And IT people at our firm and for the court actually set up a high-speed dedicated link. And we had literal trials going on, the same trial going on in Canada and the US at the same time, using very cutting-edge technology,
Yep.
with hundreds of lawyers involved. And there was a point where I was in Delaware, like questioning a witness in Canada. And I gotta tell you, that's like not something you could do in many places. And it was totally the IT departments that got that set up. That was amazing.
LTS helped you with that.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
LTS, we have a specific area at the firm, litigation technology support, and they're dedicated to getting our litigators, getting all the information for a case completely packaged from a technology standpoint and taking that case to trial. Very specifically, so there are a lot of different jobs that are outside of the specific IT department that are technology jobs in law firms that are very, very involved in both technology and the law at the same time.
And they come to trial with us. So when we go to
Yes.
trial in Delaware, the people who work for Michelle and John will be on site, with me and the other lawyers, getting ready for trial, just like part of the team, we
Yes.
are part.
There's so something, Carl, it's a very loaded question you raised, which I'm glad you did. So I want to unpack it a bit. There's the customs and procedures of our fragmented court system that Heather touched on, and then there's the preparation for trial. And to me, those two things are vastly different. The court fragmentation of different, I can't get to the specifics of it, but we had a meeting where we had all the various lead clerks of all the major courts in and around our area come to meet over a technology issue that we were not happy with. And that meeting brokered some systemic changes in how things were consistently filed with the courts, because the courts have gone electronic court filing, which sounds great on paper, but they all do it differently. So imagine trying to file and there's no consistency. To me, someone knowledgeable and having enough gumption maybe can partner and convince the government to adopt universal standards. And maybe they'll make a boatload of money doing it and change society for the better. Who knows? But if we can't worry about that just yet and we park that, back to AI and data analytics, we now have tools, and not just law firms, companies that evaluate merits of cases, where we can, through AI, see who sits on the bench at a particular court, so who the judge is, and what the judge has ruled as it relates to different matters, as it relates to the attorneys that were in front of the judge in the jurisdiction. And through statistical probability, we could bake that into the merits of a case based on implicit biases or whatever you want to call it, of where you're going to be presenting this case in. So locale, jury selection, and then the bench's disposition to these types of cases beforehand. So there are people making sophisticated modeling technologies that businesses like us and others subscribe to learn more, really the intricacies of this presentation of the case to the courts. So I'm not sure what the project was or exactly that moot court that you did. If it's the court side of it, I agree with you, quite fragmented, and it's up for debate if it should be more efficient. I think it should. And then you have this other end that you may not have gotten a clear enough picture on, because some of those tools are proprietary that I'm mentioning, and you'd have to be in the industry and the business to know they exist even.
Yeah.
I would
Thanks,
say the coolest to the trial prep, the coolest thing I've frankly ever done in my career was we were preparing for a big jury trial in Delaware over a multi-billion-dollar drug. And so we hired a jury consulting firm, and they help you go through people's social media and figure out what kind of jurors you want. And then we have a practice where they bring in what would be like sort of 3 different like juries full of people. And we each take turns going to a room. And so let's say when my colleague is in the room arguing to the jurors, they all have this little device where they can say on a scale of 1 to 10 whether they like what he's saying. We sit back, the rest of us sit back in the room, literally with a control panel with all these TV screens. And as he's talking, we can see whether people like what he's saying or not. And then I'll take my turn, I'll go in and make my argument. They'll say whether they like what I'm saying. And then we get a full transcript with all of that correlated. So we know exactly what things we said, the people liked and what they didn't like. And we use that to tailor our argument for court. And it's, so, you know, unfortunately, you can't do that at moot courts, at any law school down. But you know, when you're on a multi-billion-dollar like drug trial or a big bankruptcy or something like that, and that was literally one of the neatest experiences I've ever had as a lawyer, was prepping for that particular trial. Mm-hmm. And the technology.
That's really amazing that exists, because I remember a while ago I read this book by Richard Susskind called, I think it was called Tomorrow's Lawyers, published in 2013. And he went on to make these assumptions that the next decade would bring all these changes that you're describing right here. And it's really amazing to see that it's come to life.
Yep.
Very cool. Thank you, Carl. Great set of questions. And I believe Michelle Brown had a question, and she's here in the audience. Michelle?
Might be on mute.
Yeah, she is muted. I do have it here. So Michelle's question was, and we talked about this a little bit, do you think that AI will replace people, you know, in the workforce? You know, we see examples in the legal field, in finance and banking and customer service, you know, in all kinds of areas. Where do you see AI creating jobs in the legal field rather than replacing them?
AI isn't really it's not a robot that's going to replace people. It will ultimately replace functions, but it's a robotically enhanced exoskeleton that will give us sort of superpowers, that will give us the ability to transcend the productivity that we currently have. So the other thing that we have to think about in terms of AI, in my opinion, as a recruiting person, and somebody who is eventually going to be recruiting more data information people, more people that have touched AI in one way or another, is that AI does not replace the human factor. AI does not replace the subtleties, emotional intelligence. Lawyers are going to have to really enhance their level of emotional intelligence. The law is a relationship business, and clients have relationships with our lawyers and come to our lawyers for work. In some cases, in areas where we may not have expertise, where we have a certain level of expertise, but may not be the top firm in the country that has expertise in this particular area. But they come to us because of that relationship, because they have faith in the fact that our lawyers are some of the best lawyers in the country, and they will be able to prevail in cases. And so AI doesn't have that. It doesn't have the ability to make an emotional connection with the client. It doesn't have the ability to do that. And so there are other skills that AI will not be able to replace ultimately, that are huge skills in terms of enhancing business relationships, expanding our scope with our clients into other areas, attracting the best attorneys that are out there. So there's a lot of different things that AI can't do. Can it do help us with document review? Absolutely. Can it help us with litigation support? Absolutely. But once again, it's a tool to help us enhance our productivity, not necessarily something that's going to replace our lawyer base.
Great.
I just want to, again, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, so I'll keep it short. I agree with everything Michelle said. There's a human component, there's empathy, there's a lot of things that are outside the realm of AI, and I'll qualify yet, right? There's always the opportunity for it to evolve. The thing with AI and automation, and I like to tie the two together, and I'll put on my econ hat for a second. There will be a displacement of human capital. There's no dancing around this topic. So all of us in COVID have changed our behaviors. If you buy Chipotle, you're going on your app, you're ordering it ahead of time because the store is either closed for in-person orders and you have to do a digital purchase, and an unfriendly receipt comes out at the counter there. Someone puts it together on an assembly line and then leaves the bag at the counter for you to pick up, never to greet you, never to do a warm handshake. You transactionally are okay with it because you're hungry. You take that food, you bring it home, you hope they did what you wanted to do, and you're good. At McDonald's, you walk up to a kiosk now, and very rarely at most McDonald's will you find someone serving you at the counter. They're busy preparing the food. These companies all rightfully are looking to continue to automate and use AI. On those kiosks, they're trying to figure out predictive ways to get you to upsell, buy something else along with it. And so I think all of those tools and technologies are going to keep invading our space. And it's no different in legal, and all the tools we touched on are starting to encroach on the space. For professional service organizations, the use of automation and AI is honestly to keep in check the growing need for our services. In COVID, statistically, our services haven't stopped. There's a need for legal because you look everywhere in the media and there's a topic about data privacy. There's a topic about new and upcoming technologies that need to be protected and copyrighted internationally, domestically. There's just complexity. So our professionals and technologists are in more and more demand where there's not enough hours in the day to get the work done, where you actually have to turn away good work. The AI and automation is meant to keep at bay that onslaught of work because we can offload it. Eventually, it's going to get smarter and smarter and smarter. I'm not sure it's in my lifetime, maybe yours. You're going to have to grapple with the ethical question of what happens to human labor. Because, yeah, at some point, and again, Heather and I had this conversation at a different panel maybe a year or so ago. Take real estate law, something we do at a commercial level, but not. You all will probably lease an apartment or buy a house if you haven't already done that. And if you're buying a house, you're going to need to do a title search. You're going to need to know if the house has any liens or encumbrances on it that you want to know before the bank gives you a note or you take possession of the property. A lot of people work in that industry and make a boatload of money doing that and moving that house from person to person to person. Well, Heather and I are on a kind of a blockchain conversation, and we're affiliated with a consortium where that will displace from human beings. And the underlying instrument of that exchange will be completely digital. And Heather, maybe you could share some thoughts on that, because I think there is going to be a change in human capital. I just don't know if it's 10 years out or 30 years out.
Well, we do talk about this, and getting into the blockchain stuff is another thing we could talk about for days. I'm quite interested in particular because my brother works for Ethereum, a company that does Ethereum infrastructure as a service, services. But everyone talks about having these automated contracts on the blockchain, right? And so the idea being that you're right, instead of having a bunch of lawyers in an office typing, up contracts, you have these sort of software versions of contracts that have rules built into them such that you sort of just can't break them because they're sort of coded in. And we've had discussions about, the lawyers, like John was saying, everybody who comes into his group needs to be able to code. Well, we reach a point where all new young contract lawyers need to code, too. So I agree that there can be displacement of some jobs, and the key is to try to figure out, all right, well, what jobs aren't going to be displaced, either because you need that human interface and people will pay for it, because you could be the ones building the tools that other people will use, or to figure out the next layer of like higher level, more intellectual work that won't be automated out until the AI gets more advanced.
That's interesting. Thank you. And we only have time for a couple more questions. So if you have one, put it in the chat box and I will call on you, or I will ask it if you prefer. Just let me know that. But Simone, you're next.
Thank you. I just want to say it's nice to meet you all virtually, and thank you for coming to this event. My question, though, is, sorry, what kind of direction would you like current technology to take sooner rather than later?
Well, I would say from a lawyer's perspective, I have two perspectives. One is as a patent lawyer, where we're always dealing with the cutting edge of technology, like I said, in pharmaceutical products and other products. And so I think a lot of that stuff is going to happen. To me, a lot of the stuff involving big data, the ways to just process the amount of data that people have is going to be a big one. You can't have all this AI or all these other things unless you can figure out ways to process and store the data that just keeps growing. So from a lawyer's perspective, I want to make sure I protect your rights in that data, but then from a technology perspective, I think that kind of stuff is only going to keep growing.
Interesting. Any, John or Michelle, anything else on Simone's question?
I think there's a society, this is broader than legal. There's just a societal decision around privacy of people and what people are comfortable with as we more and more hyper-connect into cloud services. We could spend some time talking about how Europe has handled it and how the US may handle it in the next few years, but there is a growing conversation around that. That has ramifications for all businesses, including us. Anytime there's a privacy change, we have to evaluate the data, as Michelle touched on earlier, within our business to see if we conform to those privacy statutes. So if you went to Wilkie's website under privacy policy, it's pretty in-depth now. There's a lot of links and a lot of information, and that's because of regulation. So I think businesses are ever changing and conforming to this regulatory climate. And as citizens, we have to decide the appropriateness of it. And then, look, I think if we have some developers in the room, it's really important to understand environmental, social, and governance ideas around development. And, we're finding often people will code facial recognition, but it ignores certain minorities because the algorithms are built for a certain group of people. So this kind of rooting out this kind of inherent bias in technologies is really important. So for the coders there, these types of decisions are going to really change society. But the privacy stuff, immediately impacts businesses like us all the time. I think there's not been a year over the last 5-7 years that we haven't had to conform to some new privacy statute.
Yeah, and to echo that, I was at a panel a while back on privacy, and we had a bunch of people, in-house lawyers, and we realized that all of their jobs had just been created in the last few years. They all need to, and like that job just didn't exist 5 years ago, or maybe even 3 years ago. And we were talking about how great it is for young lawyers, because if you get to know privacy and cybersecurity, we have a whole privacy group now, just as much, if not more, than the old guys, right? Because these are brand new areas of the law. And then as far as the environmental and social justice factors, I agree. As AI grows, it's the big important is going to be what training set do you use for the data, and how do you make sure it doesn't discriminate? How do you make sure AI doesn't just double down on patterns of discrimination that exist in a society today, and they don't just get coded in to the software? And that's definitely something for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, really interesting stuff, and there's a lot of there's so much at play. We have a question from Eugenio, if you'd like to ask, sir.
Hi, thank you very much to pronounce my name in the correct way.
My wife's middle name is Eugenia, so.
Oh, perfect. Because people call me Eugenio if I go to Starbucks, or according to Siri is Eugenio. But thank you very much. Okay, I am not expert in AI, but I think it's very interesting in that part. I am more expert in creative technologies like Adobe. But I start, maybe this question is for Jan. I start investigating a little bit about different technology in AI and start seeing the GPT-3, okay, which is from the Open AI. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that. And I believe it's a crazy technology that is coming to stay. And that technology can learn math or can learn whatever. And what happens if that technology start learning, for example, legal? Do you really think that we will need legal persons to help us? That is my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take the more theoretical, and others can take I guess, the practice of it. So there's already a lot of work in this space. We have former attorneys that have started up some very sophisticated legal-driven AI tool sets. And so it just shows you, again, the movement of people, professionals in and out of practicing law to creating technology in law. Luminance and Kira are two widely successful AI-driven technologies. Now, that underlying AI tool set didn't come out of the ether. It was based on both the Stanford recognition patterns, as well as, I believe it was Oxford. So both of those two universities, I guess, research and some of that already being protected, patented, was licensed to Kira and Luminance. And then they added the secret sauce of applying it to a treasure trove of legal documents. And what you described is happening, which is that pattern recognition is able to decipher the semantics of language, not just that it's this word, the meaning of this phrase is this. And that's really important, because that's what junior associates are trained on, which is to understand the meaning, the semantics of a paragraph. So the short of it is, it's happening already. I think it's only going to get better and better. That's the technology. We're now putting it in front of our attorneys, and I'll pause there because I think Heather can take it from there.
Yeah, Kira is a great example. Kira is learning the law. Kira can look at 500 agreements and tell you which ones have an exclusive license to a patent, or which ones have a change of control provision. And so the way we're finding to use it is to take some of that drudgery away from the lawyers, and make the work that the associates can do higher level. Just like there's a lot of lawyers out there today who know the law, but they're not all practicing on the same type of work. The type of work we want to tell our clients is like, look, come to us for your big mergers and acquisitions, your big litigation. We're here to come up with business solutions for you. So if we can use tools to get rid of some of the document review and stuff, that's fine with us. That's not it may be the type of legal work that I did when I was a junior associate and other people did, but it's not going to get rid of the need for junior associates. We'll just hopefully having them do higher level work. So eventually the AI gets so sophisticated, then it's all going to be based on your personality and your contacts and your people skills.
Yeah, what I think, and that's the debate, right? When will we get, and that no one's got a magic crystal ball on this yet, but when do we get to a point where, if we can automate now with good success the drudgery of getting through document sets, to then form an opinion on what we just reviewed as a business decision that the said company who's retained us has to now act on, does AI ever replace that connecting of dots? And the verdict's out. I mean, I think the mathematical statistical probability is there that yes, it should, because if AI can create music, if it could create faces of people that don't exist in the world, if it could create a story, then we should be able to train AI to think like a world-class attorney, or think like a world-class radiologist who's able to better predict and pick out in a mammogram cancerous cells. And you see the Watson study and all the statistical sampling there where AI is getting better than a human being. The difference here is it's the expression of language. And we kind of get tripped up as humans because we all think we're Shakespeare. And when we write, our prose is better than any other created. And I think computers and AI is going to humble us on that front. But the computing power and the developers that are going to know what a lawyer thinks and then code that, that's why we're having this conversation today, because we need people to know law. We need people to know technology in order to input it into the computer.
Yep.
Well, that's it. We are, as can happen when you have three fabulous, fascinating guests over time. But I so appreciate this opportunity, and I'm very energized by it. And I think this is a topic that really needs to be talked about consistently and in detail. So I hope that John and Heather and Michelle, you will come back and reprise this conversation with us again, because this is really fascinating stuff. So my thanks to all of you in the Seidenberg and Pace communities who came out to support today. I'm really grateful for your engagement, and I look forward to welcoming you back. Det, when are we back again with our next program?
November 12th. I'm so glad you asked, Dean Hill. So to follow in the vein of this great conversation and access to industry leaders, we will be hosting the Seidenberg Innovation Awards featuring ADP executive Vipul, who is also a double PACE alum. So he's just as great as Heather here, who is in our midst. We'll be having a fascinating discussion with Vipul and with another PACE alum, Mike Capone, who is the CEO of Click, a data analytics company. And they'll be talking about industry trends and innovation post-pandemic. So please join us for that. And also, John, Heather, Michelle, thank you so much again to iterate Dean Hill's sentiments. And if you could stay with us for a few minutes for a quick debrief, that would be great.
Would be great. And before we go, I just want to, I think I have your next client here, Heather. Helen Tsai and her team just won a $200,000 prize with the IBM Call for Code and their mobile app. 2 Seidenberg students and 2 Lubin School of Business students competed. Helen, is your camera on?
Yeah, sure.
Hi. So you can sign virtual autographs later.
Yes.
And
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're very proud. So again, congratulations, Helen. And again, my thanks to all of you. Michelle Camardella from Alumni Relations, thank you for making this happen. Appreciate all of your support as always. And to our, there she is. There's our
Helen.
celebrity.
Hi.
Hi, Helen.
Congratulations.
That's amazing.
Thank you so much.
Very
And it's
cool.
good that you did it with the business school after the importance of all the integration we were talking about between different departments. It's great that you did it with people from the business school.
Yeah, it was like we really bind so well because they have the knowledge with business, and we Seidenberg is coding a lot, which I'm still coding at the same times, and it's really like helping each other. Yeah,
that's great.
Fantastic.
Thanks a lot.
So beautiful people, many thanks, and we will see you all again very soon. Have a great week. And
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
It is our honor and pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye now.